Here we are at Design Summit in Melbourne, and founder, of course, Mark Bergin is here, as well as RMIT staff member and a bit more, Jeremy Yuille. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're talking about next and now, Mark. What is next and now?
Well, with the themes that we've had today at the Design Summit of design courage, the design economy, made for people, next and now is the fourth one of our themes. And the reason that we're focusing on that is that some people actually think that next is actually something that they're heading for, whereas we know for a lot of people what somebody else may call next is actually occurring now. So you could also think of it as living in the future, or living in sci-fi is another way that I talk about it. So for many people who haven't gone and done their research in the marketplace, they won't know that somebody else has already raised the bar. And I'll often refer to that you don't win an Olympic gold medal by turning around and doing 5 years or 5 Olympics back's time. You do it by being equal or better than the most recent Olympics. And I think with the work that I'm seeing that Jeremy's doing through the Masters program is helping people to actually gain that masterful design, moving more up through understanding what the complexities around interaction design are, service design, and that's why this is such an important topic. If we can't get people to actually understand what's contemporary, then they don't know how to go and actually shoot for the future.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. There's a great quote here, which is that it's from William Gibson, that the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Yeah, and it kind of helps us to see. You know, you can start to see these little points that sort of stick out from the landscape, where really interesting things are happening, and they can point towards the future, and you can start to extrapolate from them. You know. So some of the topics that you've got here, you know, thinking about design for the economy, okay, and the way that designers need to really understand not just how to run their own business, but how to be able to create value for other people's businesses, and courage as well is a fantastic one.
And I think, you know, a theme that, or a quote that we came up with a number of years ago, which is that tomorrow is the outcome of yesterday's courage. And you know, I think that's such a pertinent point for people to realise that our forefathers, they had a lot of courage in the things that they planned, and we're getting the benefits of those. To not have a courageous position is going to mean that we're going to have something which is maybe a little bit beige. We want to have a future which is technicolor, that's exciting and is enduring. That's going to require a lot of courage from a range of people. And courage also means that you're likely to go and learn by something not being quite right. Doesn't mean getting it right all the time. So I think the idea of celebrating excellence through the awards that we're doing, we're not trying to turn around and say that this is good or bad design. We're trying to say here are the people to refer to because they've had the courage, they've looked into what tomorrow is, and they're offering that as a reference point for you today.
You can encourage courage, if I can use those words, but can you actually teach it in design?
It's a really good point. So one of the things that we're finding here is that a lot of the craft and making of design is you know, it's at a very high level across the board. Okay, and so one of the things that you then need to do is how do you transcend that, or how do you learn how to learn from what it is, you know, from your experiences, from, let's take the startup sort of mentality of failing fast and forward and things like that. But so a growth mindset is potentially one of these things that we're interested in teaching. How can you get people, let's say design, you know, has traditionally been thought of as kind of a solo activity, the solo designer creating the beautiful object, yeah. But now, as a lot of the products you've been talking about today, learning from the way they work with customers, yeah, learning from the way that they create their products with customers is a really interesting new skill that designers need to have. And yes, I think you can teach it. And you can teach it to people who haven't been trained traditionally in design as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's you know, you mentioned there about the startup culture and about failing fast. I've worked as a creative person for 30 years. I've never thought that I've failed in a project. I've learnt, but I don't believe that I've failed. And I think that disruptive startup tech culture is going to be very much about a binary state. It's going to be right or wrong. But for people who come from a design background or a creative background, it might be that you didn't get as far to the optimal outcome. You know, every project seems to have an arc. Sometimes those arcs are very short, other times they're very long, but I've always worked on projects that have had an arc. And so that to me is about celebrating courage, whereas the binary side about, no, you got something wrong, we're going to actually pull funding, we're going to stop the impetus behind that. I'm not sure that's actually the best way for us to turn around and engender courage in a marketplace, and I'm not sure that people who disrupt with technology are necessarily the people who are going to design tomorrow.
And it's great, thanks Mark. We've had this chat about fail as a word, and it's kind of the flip side of it as being maybe learn, you know, as this key thing that designers and anyone who's kind of working in this place where they're trying to make change happen. Yeah. So I mean, change is very difficult to make happen. But it's potentially easier to help create the space for change to happen, which is when you start to work with the people for whom the change is happening. That's a bit convoluted. But anyway, let's think about this for a second, because there's another thing that we're identifying as this kind of, I suppose, skills that you may want to teach designers. And it is around learning. And it's around how do you help to create change, not in just the products that are created, but also maybe the organisations where those products are being created. Okay, so increasingly we're starting to see that the work of design is moving up. If we say the Danish design ladder, where you're moving from, you know, the styling of an object through to the way that you develop products, through to the way that you start to design the organisations that those products are developed in, and this requires really skillful use of learning and teaching methods, as well as design and all of the things that we're seeing that come out of your traditional design skills.
And I suppose there, if we're trying to get people who are growing their skills, that also needs to be matched for the people who are commissioning those projects, that their skills and their literacy is growing at a similar rate, so that they're able to feel that they're contemporaries in a project, not that they're being left behind by somebody who's going off on their whim. So, you know, there's both the need for people who are on the demand side, coming and doing things like a master's, as much as people who are on the creative side or the supply side. We don't have that duality of development on both sides of the market. We're going to wind up with a bunch of people who think that the other side don't understand and don't care, or it could just be that you haven't actually done that co-supportive role and co-creation role, which means that you need to learn together.
Certainly. So next and now, this is the big conversation that we're having, and thank you very much, Jeremy Yuille. Also, thank you, Mark Bergin.